Good evening, everyone. Let's bow in. Welcome to the Buddhist Path of Awakening course, based on Trungpa Rinpoche's teachings in the profound treasury of the ocean of Dharma, the 3-volume set, which is a digest of the talks that he gave over the course of 15 years to seminary participants. He took 150 to 250 people away each fall for 3 months. First month was Hinayana teachings, the second Mahayana, and the third Vajrayana. We are on the Mahayana teachings, reading the second volume, and we have gotten to the teachings on Lojong. Lojong means mind training. And many of us are reading other things as well, because there are some terrific books on Lojong. I sent out a list of them in the most recent email, although there's just several of them. Pema's book on Start Where You Are, it's called, and Trungpa Rinpoche's book, Lojong, on Lojong, and of course, the book by Juggman Control the Great, who lived in the latter part of the 19th century, called The Great Path of Awakening. And there are others. This is a wonderful practice. I'm hoping that many, if not all of us, will incorporate it into our practices, and especially as we go along further into the Lojong slogans. These teachings are organized into 7 points, and these 7 points contain 59 slogans. Tonight, we're going to deal with the first point, which only has 1 slogan, as well as the first part of the second point, which has 5 slogans in it, and then there are 4 more that will come up in subsequent weeks, or a week. So tonight I'm going to be leading off, and we're dealing with chapter 35, which is point 1, the 1 slogan, which are the preliminaries, which are the basis for Dharma practice. And these preliminaries we actually chanted in the opening chants, and we're probably going to keep chanting them. They are: joyful to have such a human birth, difficult to find, free and well-favored. That's the first of these preliminaries, or reminders, they're called. But death is real, comes without warning. This body will be a corpse. That's the second reminder, or the second preliminary. These are called the common preliminaries, and sometimes the 4 reminders. Unalterable are the laws of karma. Cause and effect cannot be escaped. That's the third preliminary. Samsara is an ocean of suffering, unendurable, unbearably intense. That's the fourth, as they're organized in the chant, although tonight in the chapter, we're going to be going through them in a slightly different order. The first 2 are the same, but the third one is going to be suffering, and the fourth is karma. So Trungpa Rinpoche makes the point that these slogans are about come to life in your relationship with a teacher. And of course, he was speaking about himself. It says they represent a developing love affair between the student and the teacher. In our case, it's going to be more of the lineage as it comes down through lesser teachers. But still, that principle of these teachings having to be communicated from one living person to another, that holds. they can't be just understood from a book. They have to come alive and be consumed, as he said, like fresh bread. In that regard, I apologize for the delay. I don't know why it's happening, but I've got a slight delay in my audio and visual. He says, the slogans establish the contrast between samsara, which is the epitome of pain, imprisonment, and insanity, and the teacher, who is the embodiment of openness, freedom, and sanity as the fundamental basis for all practice. And this is heavily influenced by the Vajrayana tradition, with that emphasis on the living quality of the transmission. At this point now, he didn't say a lot, Trungpa Rinpoche, so I'm going to give you some things that were said by other people. That these slogans are meant to remind us and inspire us about what is really important in our lives, and to inspire us to use our time constructively instead of squandering it in meaningless activities. There's so many distractions in our lives. Worry about work, but involvement with entertainments of all kinds, what we're going to eat, what we're going to watch on television, who we have to call and establish a social relationship, all kinds of things that we take our time, we draw up lists of all the things we need to do. And many of these things, for each one of us, and it's different, come ahead of practice and study and really undoing the fundamental problems of our lives. He says, lazy and complacent, sometimes we crawl out of bed and drift through our days without purpose, through the motions. The cure for this, or one of the cures anyhow, is to contemplate these preliminaries at the beginning of each practice session, to sharpen our intelligence and renew our inspiration for the path. And even this is slightly shocking. He says the preliminaries are more important than the main practice because they generate direction and motivation to pursue the spiritual path. These preliminaries contain devotion. And I'd like to stop for a second and talk about this word devotion. This is an English translation of the Tibetan word mugu. Mugu actually means humble interest. It's humble in that your ego is dampened. You're actually open, you're ready to hear. And there's extreme interest. So when we say devotion is the head of meditation, as is taught, to this meditator who always supplicates the Guru, grant your blessing so that genuine devotion is born in me. We're talking about this mugu, humble, open devotion. What humble means is not slavish, sort of your tongue out. This is what the Tibetans used to do, or down on your knees. I remember I was with Trungpa Rinpoche when he first met Allen Ginsberg. Well, he actually met him in coming out of a taxi. But later we set up a meeting for him in San Francisco. And Allen was very into the Hindu modus. He'd been sort of hanging around Hindu gurus. He was waiting for us in Rinpoche's motel room at the Travel Lodge. And Rinpoche made us stop for a drink on the way, and we were late. And when he got to the stairs, we were up on the second floor, he told Marvin and me that he had to put his arms around our shoulders because he couldn't walk up the stairs. He was too drunk, which we didn't believe, but we did it anyhow. And we all went up the stairs together. And then there was, at the top of the stairs, there was a long sort of walkway covered with that plastic indoor-outdoor carpeting. It looks like grass, and a wrought iron railing. And we started down that way, Rinpoche galumphing along with his arms on. We're struggling to keep everybody upright. And out the door at the end of the pathway, comes Alan. And At that point, Rinpoche starts running, and we all went sprawling on this indoor-outdoor carpeting. We got to our feet, Marvin and I, we picked up Rinpoche, and just as we did, Alan arrived, bent down, and kissed Rinpoche's shoes. And I started thinking, uh-oh, this is not a good beginning. Rinpoche hated that kind of thing, but it was something you did with Hindu teachers. Things turned out interesting, but fine, more or less. It was pretty interesting evening, the whole rest of it. That's a story you can read about someplace. So this devotion is not slavish devotion. It's interested humility. And there's an analogy for this in the teachings. They say that the student is like a cup. There are, how many kinds? 3 or 4 kinds of cups. The kinds you don't want a cup is a cup that has a hole in it, because then when you pour whatever, teachings into that cup, that student, it just goes out the hole. Nor do you want a cup that has dirt in it. It might be not have any holes, but has dirt, because then you pour the teachings in and they become diluted with dirt. Worse yet is a cup that actually has poison in it, and you pour the teachings in and they become poisonous. What you want is a solid cup, and that's what devotion means. Devotion means that the student is a solid cup ready to receive the teachings, to appreciate them with interest and humility, being willing to accept them. So these preliminaries are a way of cultivating that kind of devotion, that kind of humility with interest. And this humility is characterized by inquisitiveness and the desire to learn. That's my note. Aryadeva, who was a disciple of Nagarjuna, lived in the 3rd century AD, said, "An unprejudiced, intelligent, and interested listener is called a vessel." That's it. That's what you want. Unprejudiced, intelligent, and interested listener. So we're going to take, and he also says, before you contemplate the 4 preliminaries, which we should take refuge in the triple gem, because those 3 represent the source of all good qualities on the path and plant the seeds of liberation in us. The Buddha, liberated beings, and we have confidence in the Buddha. His techniques that work for him were the Dharma, and we have confidence in the Dharma. And Buddhism is a living tradition that has been continuously practiced and passed down by one practitioner to the next, and we develop confidence in the Sangha. Finally, it says, I'm going to read from the text, "Our lives are short and unpredictable." And I wrote, where did all those years go? It's amazing. I just, like that, a finger snap. If we fail to separate the essential from the non-essential, we will lose ourselves in everyday preoccupations and petty pursuits. And when the time comes to die, it will be too late to change. While we have time, instead of harping on our dissatisfactions, and looking for entertainments, we should reflect on the favorable conditions for practice and resolve to make the most of our opportunities by inscribing the following thought permanently in our minds. And here's the thought that Trallag Rinpoche gives us. "I have wasted enough time. Why waste more? From now on, I'll do something constructive and beneficial with my life instead of squandering it in meaningless activities." So the first reminder is a precious human body, that we are fortunate to have whatever we need so that we can study and practice, meditate, tread the path. We have our health adequate to these purposes at the moment. He says, instead of thinking, how terrible, I put on another 2 pounds, or getting up in the morning to see 3 more lines around our eyes only to go back to bed, we need to capitalize on our opportunities to reap the benefits of spiritual practice while we can. Milarepa says, "Oh, you confused and worldly beings, you always waste your leisure, letting time slip by. Though your mind is ever saying, I must practice Dharma, your life is wasted as the hours slip by. This is Milarepa, speaking in the 11th century. And I don't think things change much. There's a famous analogy that's given to the preciousness of having this human body. They say the likelihood of being born a human. Now remember, there are 8 billion humans on the planet right now, almost. But think, how many insects are there? You could be reborn an insect. There are trillions of insects. There are trillions of life forms other than human beings. And so they say, this is the classic analogy going back probably 2,000 years almost, that the likelihood of being born in a human body, which is what you need to tread the path, by the way, you absolutely need this body, a human body. An animal body won't do, a god's body won't do, nothing except a human body. And the likelihood is if there were a tortoise swimming in the ocean, this long-lived, miraculous tortoise that only comes up for air every 1,000 years or 100 years, I forget which. And if once when it comes up for air, there happens to be the yoke of an oxen floating in the water, and the tortoise happens to put its head right through that yoke, that is the likelihood of achieving a human birth. So we should be really, really grateful. I'll just read you. Here's a 16th century Nyingma Vedanta Sangye. He implores, life is so ephemeral, like the dew on the grass. People of Tingri, don't yield to laziness and indifference. And just before this session, I was talking with my brother whose wife makes films about death in Canada, she's on the Buddhist teachings too. And she's been interviewing a lot of people who do hospice work. And they're talking about how, what it's like to treat people in hospice. And it's very, very poignant, very touching. Much better way to go than to die in a hospital. That's a bad way to go. Much better to die in a hospice facility or at home with hospice workers who are focusing on the quality of the death. And then this last quote, even if mountains are subject to change and dissolution, how much more so is my own body, which is susceptible to disease, breakdown, the elements, accidents, and all kinds of harm. I must utilize my opportunities now before that chance is lost forever. So that's the preciousness of a human birth. The dissatisfactory nature of samsara. And I just want to point, it's all of us here who are old, not everybody, but the ones who are. Didn't it go by so fast? It just was like a finger snap. Where did all those years go? How much time did we spend engaged in one kind of burning up time or another? So the dissatisfactory nature of samsara, impermanence is the second one. It just has to do with how everything is changing. And we have to quell our complacency and challenge our tendency to defer spiritual practice. We should stop pursuing deluded seductions. And then I read that quote about mountains. I'm sitting here in Colorado. This is the second set of Rockies. The first set rose and fell over the course of how many hundreds of millions, if not billions of years. And this set rose, and they're still rising. The third in this particular presentation is the dissatisfactory nature of samsara, that we never find any real meaning or purpose in our worldly pursuits. We go around in circles, repeating the same mistakes. And none of these things brings release, fundamental release of any kind from our pain or malaise or confusion. And we need to distinguish between the fulfillment of our temporary needs versus the fulfillment of our more profound ones. We search for illusory satisfactions, the next TV show, the next great movie, the next great meal. And we wander aimlessly from life to life, figuratively speaking and literally. But in this life, we wander from one different incarnation to the next without any particular direction or purpose. Shantideva says, the high have mental suffering. For the common people, it comes from the body. Day by day, both kinds of suffering overwhelm the people of the world. As long as we're in samsara, seeming pleasures will only be pleasurable for a fleeting moment, and then they're past. Finally, cause and effect, which really has to do with intention. We have intentions in our minds that have been planted there through habit, through experience, and all kinds of preconceptions and predilections, so that when we come into a particular situation like this one, we see it through a filter of training, past training, and act according to that filter. This is karma, the law of cause and effect. The cause is our preconditioning, and the effect is the way in which we act now, which then becomes the cause for further preconditioning and further action. And these karmic patterns are formed and sustained by intentional actions of the three gates. He says the three gates are your body, your speech, conceptual speech, and your mind, the way you perceive. Juggman Control says, the result of wholesome actions is happiness. The result of unwholesome action is suffering, and nothing else. These results are not interchangeable. But finally, a caution. Even good actions producing good results are still karmic enslavement. We need to break the chain at some point. And the way in which we break it, by the way, is by coming present, by not going into action. When we begin to feel an urge, you see it like a thought, and you don't go into action on it. As soon as you go into action, you're often running into karma. But when you bring it to simple awareness, you can break that karmic chain. Finally, to practice the preliminary serves three functions. And there's a slogan, good at the beginning, good at the middle, and good at the end. At the beginning, they encourage us to propel ourselves into spiritual practice. In the middle, they help us sustain our practice with diligence and vigor. And at the end, they come to and aid our spiritual fulfillment. We're not contemplating these reminders in order to turn our backs on the world and lose interest in living. Quite the reverse. Through practicing these reminders and practicing these teachings that we're going to be talking about today and ongoing, we will live a much more fulfilling, vibrant, alive life, present for whatever is happening. So he says we should not delay. Anything can happen, and time is rushing by. These reminders and enjoinders distinguish the essential from the non-essential and enjoin us to live a life without regret, without waste. So I'm going to stop here. They're really quite beautiful, aren't they, these four reminders? And turn this over to Philip, who is going to be talking about the next chapter.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, everyone, for the opportunity to present tonight. I'm going to talk about ultimate bodhicitta, slogans 2 to 6. And I'm going to depart from our usual text because, frankly, I found much of the material there somewhat impenetrable. But here are the books that we're going to use. I'll be using Juggman Control a lot. And he was an important teacher for Chogyam Trungpa. I'll be using this book by Chogyam Trungpa, Training the Mind. We'll touch on this book a little bit, most likely. This is Tokme Zangpo. I've referred to this book before. Ken MacLeod is the translator, Reflections on Silver River. And most of all, most useful for me, is this transcript. This is about 40 years old from a sort of an off-the-cuff conversation that Chogyam Trungpa had with members of the Nalanda Translation Committee, in which I finally understood what it meant when one said, rest in the nature of aliyah. I've always wondered what aliyah meant, and a big part of my talk tonight will be trying to communicate that information to you. For me, it seemed like a real breakthrough, a real understanding. Actually, it's what propelled me to email John to volunteer to do this presentation tonight. I've put my email in chat if you guys want any detailed references or have any questions. But let's go ahead and start with the slogans. You can go to page 447 of our primary text. That's this guy. And you'll find all of them in a list, and you won't have to flip back and forth through pages looking for them. So we'll be doing slogans 2 to 6. And Chogyam Trungpa's translations are 2, regard all dharmas as dreams. 3, examine the nature of unborn awareness. 4, self-liberate even the antidote. 5, rest in the nature of aliyah, the essence. And 6, in post-meditation, be a child of illusion. So slogans 2 to 6 have always seemed to me to be at once the most important of all the slogans, but also somehow the most incomprehensible. And I was thinking about that, putting this talk together. We begin with serious limitations here. We have to use words to describe what is essentially beyond words, totally ineffable. And we have to use consciousness to try to understand what exists beyond consciousness. So it's sort of like a flashlight trying to illuminate itself. Okay, let's try to unpack these slogans. The first 4 concern meditation, the last one, post-meditation. And I'm going to go through the slogans once again for you quickly. Regard all dharmas as dreams. Examine the nature of unborn awareness. Self-liberate even the antidote. Rest in the nature of aliyah, the essence. Those are the meditation slogans. And the post-meditation slogan, in post-meditation, be a child of illusion. So these are all about ultimate bodhicitta, the union of wisdom and compassion. And I brought along a representation of Manjushri, the Bodhisattva of wisdom. And here we're talking about the wisdom understanding emptiness. And also Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion. 2 wings of a bird, wisdom and compassion. Ultimate bodhicitta. So how to start? Picture a meadow and a mountain and a broad path connecting the two. Picture a sentient being in that meadow, utterly delusional, and yet somehow full of absolute conviction, convinced of his or her existence as a solid self, a real chest thumper, independent, unitary, permanent, inherently existent. Then picture the summit of the mountain, all space and luminosity. Okay, hold on to this image. We'll return to it. Let's start with a story, a quest story, a journey, and a poem. Once upon a time, a long time ago, in the 3rd century AD, there walked upon this earth a future Buddha, designated by the Buddha Shakyamuni himself as his regent. His name was Maitreya, and his student was Asanga. You know these names. Asanga was one of those 3 teachers, along with Nagarjuna and Tilopa, whose work Atisha brought to Tibet. Juggman Control gives us a 4-line poem about Maitreya and Asanga. And he's speaking in this poem about slogans 2 to 5. He says, these 4 instructions present all the philosophy of Maitreya's teachings to Asanga. As it is said in Maitreya's teachings, after the awareness that there is nothing other than mind, comes the understanding that mind too is nothing itself. The intelligent know that these 2 understandings are not things. And then, not holding onto even this knowledge, they come to rest in the realm of totality. And that's the whole thing. But let's go deeper. Ken McLeod provides this translated commentary. Slogan 2, look at all experience as a dream. Chogyam Trungpa's translation again is, regard all dharmas as dreams. What we experience, that is, the world and its inhabitants, are objects that we grasp at with our senses. These appearances are simply our mind's manifestations of confusion. In the end, they are not actually existent in any way whatsoever, but are like the appearance in a dream. What he's talking about here basically is what we call twofold egolessness. He goes on to say, should you wonder if mind in itself is real? Go to slogan 3. Examine the nature of unborn awareness. What he means here is examine the nature of the mind. When you look directly at the presence of mind, no color, no shape, no form is perceived. Since mind has no origin, it has never come into existence in the first place. Now, it is not located anywhere, inside or outside the body. Finally, the mind is not some object that goes somewhere or ceases to exist. By examining and investigating mind, you should come to a precise and certain understanding of the nature of this awareness, which has no origin, location, or cessation. So that seemed a little didactic, but it's very important. So I want to spend a minute and go to this book and do exactly that with you for a couple of minutes. This is Ken McLeod, and this is Examining the Nature of Your Own Mind. So bear with me and let's do this exercise together. Take a breath. Let it out slowly without strain. Do that again 3 or more times until mind and body settle naturally. Think of something. It can be anything, but think of just one thing. Your partner, a friend, a flower, or an idea. The thought can be a word or phrase, a picture or a sound. Where is that thought? In your mind, of course, but what does that mean? Is the thought inside your head? Is it outside your head? It is there. It is vivid. Say you have a picture in your mind. Where is that picture? Inside? Outside? Where? If you have not done this exercise before, by now you are probably flooded with thoughts and ideas and are trying to figure out how to do it. Instead, let it all go and start again. Go back to the 3 breaths and let mind and body settle. Now, think a thought about just one thing. Picture it if you wish. Where is that picture? When you look this time, do not look with your mind. Do not look with your eyes. Do not try to figure anything out. Just look with your whole being, including your body. You know, see, or hear the thought. The thought is there, definitely, but where is it? Do not try to figure this out. Just look. Where is it? You cannot say. I won't go back to Juggman Control now. Actually, I wanted to say a couple of things. As we go along, I've tried to tie some ideas together for you. What happens here, the end result of that, and do it later on to convince yourself, you'll discover that the more you search, the less you find. An important thing here, sort of a progression through the Buddhist development of thinking and teaching, is that we move from the mind-only school that we've referenced before, the Siddhamatrans and the Yogacaryans, into the middle way school, the Prasangika Madhyamika. And what we're getting to with this slogan is that the mind itself is empty. So the prior slogan, what we call twofold egolessness, we find that the self is empty and that, in fact, all phenomena are empty. And we think of that with our mind and we realize those are dreams and illusions. But here, and one of the things that makes the middle way school special is the understanding that even the mind is empty. In fact, for the middle way school, everything is empty. Even emptiness is empty. Okay, now we'll come back. Thoughts about this remedy for the tendency to cling to existence may come up. For example, you may think, mind and body all are empty, or nothing is helpful or harmful in emptiness. If this happens, then go to the next slogan. Let even the remedy release naturally. Self-liberate even the antidote. I always had trouble understanding that. What it means is, when you look right at the essence, thoughts about the absence of true existence, when you look right at the essence of thoughts about the absence of true existence, it has no reference and releases naturally. Rest in this state. That is to say, even these two concepts, understanding emptiness, are empty. Let them go. They will dissolve on their own. Go back to the image of the meadow and the mountain. As we progress along the path, we leave all these things behind. The mind's deluded concept of self, the mind's deluded concept of other, then the mind itself is left behind. Even the realization of these insights is left behind. Going, gone. We're moving from conventional to ultimate truth. There are all of these parallel movements here through these slogans. At the heart of the Heart Sutra, there's this mantra, gate, paragate, parasamgate, gone, gone beyond, gone altogether beyond. Which then brings us to slogan 5, rest in the nature of aliyah, perhaps the most important slogan of all. So Juggman Control says about this, and there are several ways to translate this slogan. Rest in the nature of aliyah, the essence. That's Chogyam Trungpa's translation. Juggman Control's translation is the essence of the path, rest in the basis of all experience. And many other translators would translate it as rest in the essence of the path, the basis of everything. But it all comes down to this notion, going back to that image in your mind. It all comes down to the top of the mountain, this thing that you might call aliyah. Juggman Control says, let go and rest without the slightest idea of a nature existing as something, with absolutely no mental clinging, in a state distinguished by non-discursive clarity and pure simplicity. In summary, for as long as you are able, follow no train of thought, but rest evenly in a state in which mind in itself is clear and free of discursiveness. That's it. Rest in the nature of aliyah. Okay. But what is aliyah exactly? Well, it's complicated. It's the penultimate and the ultimate end of this spectrum. It's the mountaintop. It's the space and the luminosity that surround it. Maitreya calls it the realm of totality. One way to look at it, and our main text does look at it this way, is to look at it through the levels of consciousness. So I'll go over the first part quickly because we looked at this before. Again, think of the meadow and the mountain and moving up to the summit. 1 to 6, these levels of consciousness, are the sensory perceptions: sight, hearing, taste, touch, smell. Number 6, the thinking mind consciousness, thought and mental activity, which sort of integrates the first 5. Then we get up to the 7th level of consciousness, Jnana Ni, consciousness of emotional mind, the so-called nuisance mind. That's the consciousness of self, a felt sense of I. And then as we move to the 8th level, we enter the realm of aliyah, and things get fuzzy, things get confusing. Everybody, all of the schools of Buddhism believe in an 8th level of consciousness called aliyah Vijnana. Chogyam Trungpa, in this transcript, breaks aliyah down into 3 parts, and he refers to this one as lower level aliyah, aliyah Vijnana. This is known as aliyah consciousness. It's referred to as the consciousness that precedes ego. And that's one of the reasons why I got confused reading our main text. So sometimes people will think it's a directional thing. So we're starting in the meadow, right, with a sentient being with this huge ego, and we're going up to the summit. But sometimes they'll talk about going down. So as you go from level 8 down to level 7, in that sense, aliyah Vijnana is the consciousness that precedes ego as you go from 8 to 7. At this level, level 8, while there are predispositions towards samsara, a sense of self is not explicitly present. This consciousness, aliyah Vijnana, is known as storehouse consciousness, unconscious memory, sort of the unconsciousness of ego. This is where the karmic seeds are, impressions of previous experiences from which form the seeds of future karma. This is the aliyah that gives birth to grasping, again, going downhill from 8 to 7. Ken MacLeod calls this consciousness as the basis of everything, because there are still traces of samsara here. And then we can go beyond that to 2 more levels, which aren't technically speaking really recognized as levels. They're not formally considered levels of consciousness in the Kaigyu tradition. The Nichiren Buddhism formally acknowledges a 9th consciousness, and the Atu tradition presents an ultimate aliyah. But basically, we stop at 8. But Chogyam Trungpa does, in this discussion, talk about 2 more levels, which for the purposes of clarity, we could label 9 and 10. So 9 would be higher level aliyah, what Chogyam Trungpa calls aliyah of the basic ground. This is the basis of all experience, the essence of the path, basic aliyah. This is pre-aliyah Vijnana, again, looking at it as you go downhill. This is luminosity of the basic aliyah. This is ultimate aliyah. These are all Chogyam Trungpa's names for the same thing. This level is free of karmic impurities, where none of the confusions and constrictions of samsara are present. This is the ground of all phenomena, both of samsara and nirvana. Ken MacLeod calls this one mind as it is, the basis of everything. There are no traces of samsara on this level. Going back to this and this breakthrough that I had, I come across, there's this guy named Larry Mermelstein, who some of you know, who has done a lot of work on all of these translations. And he asked Chogyam Trungpa flat out, is that the aliyah referred to in the slogan, rest in the nature of aliyah? And Chogyam Trungpa says, mm-hmm. So Larry asks him, what is the term for that higher aliyah? And Chogyam Trungpa says, it is the ultimate aliyah. In the Tibetan, Tongyi Kanshi, or perfectly pure ultimate aliyah, Yang Dak Pe Tongyi Kanshi. Finally, in addition to the aliyah of the eighth consciousness, right, the aliyah of Vijnana, and the higher level aliyah of the basic ground, level 9 if you want, Chogyam Trungpa presented a third type of aliyah, a knowing that is self-aware and self-luminous. So I'll call this number 10. This is Dharmata. This is the highest level aliyah. This is Shapa Rang Rik Rang Sel. This is complete purity. This is the true nature of reality. This has a lot of names. This is Buddha nature. This is Sugatagarbha. This is Tathagat. I can't ever pronounce this. Tathagatagarbha. This is basic brilliance. This is luminosity of co-emergent wisdom. Okay, you're with me so far. We have nothing left now but space, brilliance, luminosity. That's a lot to wrap our minds around, so to speak, especially when we left our minds behind. And it gets worse than that when we consider the dimension of time, which no one ever really talks about, except to say we should be present in the here and now, that moment between past and future. But think about it. That moment is actually just an instant. It's the space between my two hands. Everything on this side is the past. Everything on this side is the future. That instant is nothing more than a mere border, a line separating dreams of the past from dreams of the future. So much for time. So how do we manage all of this? Everything's a dream, self and other, all phenomena, dreamed up by our minds. Even our minds are a dream. Even realizations about these things are dreams, space and time. What does aliyah mean for us right now? Us, baby bodhisattvas in this brave new world. This is where spiritual friends become so important. John and Michael point us toward higher aliyah every time they guide us into meditation. Chogyam Trungpa has this advice for us. I'm going to read just a little bit from this book. He says, resting in aliyah is the actual practice of ultimate bodhicitta, what happens during sitting practice. You experience ultimate bodhicitta at that level. Ultimate bodhicitta is purely the realization that phenomena cannot be regarded as solid, but at the same time, they are self-luminous. It may be an embarrassing subject to discuss, but this book is designed for the ordinary practitioner. We are not believing in or cultivating aliyah, but we are using it as a stepping stone. It would be dangerous if you cultivated it as an end in itself. In this case, it is just another step on the ladder. We are talking very simply about aliyah as just a clear mind, a basic clear mind. It is simplicity and clarity and non-discursive thought, very basic aliyah. It may not be completely free from all the consciousnesses, including the eighth consciousness itself, but it is the aliyah of basic potentiality. We have to be very clear on this, generally speaking. And I had to smile there because this is very confusing stuff, right? We have to be very clear on this, generally speaking. We are not trying to grasp the Buddha nature immediately at this point. This instruction on resting in aliyah is given to somebody who is at the very beginning level. It is a slowing down process. For the first time, we learn to slow down. So in summary, rest in the nature of aliyah. Get as close to it as you can. On the cushion, off the cushion, all the time. Carry it everywhere. This, by the way, is what slogan 6 is all about, the post-meditation slogan. Juggman Control translates it as, in post-meditation, be a child of illusion. Juggman Control and Ken MacLeod similarly translated, in daily life, be a child of illusion. A child of illusion is beautiful, but it's unclear. And Ken MacLeod offers a little insight on that. And so I'll finish up with his explanation. The translation, child of illusion, is due to Trungpa Rinpoche. Other teachers explain this line as, be a sorcerer. A sorcerer knows that the illusions that he creates through enchantments or spells are illusions. In that way, one should know that the experiences that arise in life are simply appearances that arise in the mind and have no substantial existence. So this slogan, in other words, comes down to this. After meditation, hold on to your understanding of emptiness as best you can. Pema Chodron interprets this slogan this way. She says, lighten up. There is space all around us. Thank you for your patience and attention. Rest in the nature of aliyah. I'll turn this back to you, John.
We could have a discussion.
Wow. That was breathtaking.
That was great, Philip.
Thanks. I was really anxious. I kept saying to myself, this is your ego being anxious, Philip. But I was still really anxious.
Well, you really jumped into the deep end.
Wow.
Yeah, it was very good. Any questions or comments? Gary, let's go to gallery view.
I'm going to have to listen to the whole thing again.
I just want to say one thing. It's going to stick with me. Lighten up. Thank you, Philip.
Amazing.
Thank you, Philip.
That was just.
One of the things I love about John's teaching and Michael's teaching is this all happens on almost a subconscious level. This is what we do every time we meditate. We long ago moved from shamatha into this without even knowing it really.
Yes, Trungpa Rinpoche says that the prerequisite for developing your understanding of compassion is to learn how to be. And that is really what ultimate bodhicitta is about, is learning how to be. And that we do this when we sit in meditation and we learn how to actually stay on our seat and be. Now, we may feel that we're going off into dream from time to time, but basically we're not moving, even if we're dreaming, and we keep coming back to this place where we are being. And this is the fundamental and first job of being on the spiritual path, is learning how to be. And that this is the essence of the ultimate bodhicitta, or at least the prerequisite for it, that Philip has been discussing tonight.
Wow.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Philip. Philip, that was really a great presentation. And I'm anxious to even talking about it because it was so good. But one of the things you were conveying was how hard a lot of this is to describe. And it's kind of it's a paradox, because we're describing something that's supposed to be non-conceptual, right? How do you do that? But I was also thinking, and it's something I thought about before, but I thought of it when you said, and what is aliyah? It's, we use the word mind for something that in Tibetan and probably in Sanskrit, there are 8 or 10 different words for, right? There's Sem, there's Tug, there's Samchan, right? And it's like, it's like when you hear about indigenous people of, up north, and they have 8 different, 10 or whatever different words for snow, something we're not attuned to. We're using mind for so many different words, so many different kinds of mind. We're using one word, and it's, there's the mind of aliyah, there's the mind of Yid, there's the mind of Semchen, and it makes it even that much harder too, the subtleties. But I really appreciate your presentation, Phil. That was great. Thanks.
It was just stunning. Amazing.
Robert.
I don't know if you could see me too well. This is the best I could do in the light that I have here. I was particularly taken by the example of the past and the future and the now being, and that in Zen, this position is called Gasho. I don't know what it's called in Tibetan Buddhism, but would you please talk more about the space between the two hands?
I don't know much about it. And as I was putting the talk together today, it did occur to me that on top of everything else, time loses its meaning too. And it just seemed like a good way to illustrate it to this group. So I believe in being present in the here and now. I totally subscribe to the idea that the past is a delusion and the future is this promise which may not be realized. But I was thinking today about what the here and now meant, and the time kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until it became just a line between the past and the future.
Mm.
That's where we live. It's like everything is shed as we go along this path. Our conception of ourselves, our conception of the reality of everything around us, these thoughts, these realizations, this mind that we think that we have, everything is lost. And good riddance to it, right? It's like shedding baggage.
Yeah, the highs and the lows.
In the Juggman teachings, they say that time doesn't exist at all, past, present, and future. They are myths. The only thing they talk about this right here and now, whatever you want to call it, and they call it the fourth moment, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, there's like so much more in this moment than the limits of the dead past that keeps getting thrown into the future. And it's really an exploration. That's what it feels like to me. And there's like the fear of letting go that comes along with that, of something that I think I know, but who is it that I think I know? You know, it's not even being attached to the thinker.
It is an exploration. I wanted to end this talk with this wish for you all, but it seemed somehow inappropriate, so I left it out. But I'll do it now. And what I wanted to say was Godspeed.
That's
Because you are on a journey.
Yeah.
A remarkable journey.
I'm thinking these chapters are so profound and so difficult that maybe we'll take another week on them. And I'm thinking I might send out a PDF to everybody of Cholag Rinpoche's presentation of them, which might be helpful. Although I think that at first I went through the Trungpa Rinpoche reading in the Profound Treasury and found it very difficult to understand. But then working with it again, harder, I actually found it useful and comprehensible. But these concepts are so core and so subtle and so profound that they're going to be difficult. They are not everyday ideas at all. And there's so much to be said. I was thinking, about the levels of the aliyah. Until I saw that article that Philip held up, I knew of 2 levels of aliyah. Now I've got 3. Aliyah means the storehouse. That's literally what aliyah means. The storehouse of everything. And in Tibetan, it's kunchi, which means the storehouse of all. And let's just take it on 2 levels. The first level, it's the aliyah vijnana. Vijnana is a Sanskrit word that means consciousness. There are, in samsaric mind, confused mind, 8 consciousnesses. The idea is that mind looks through an organ and sees an object. So there are 3 things there, right? There's the mind, the organ, and the object. And there's the mind of seeing, the seeing mind, that looks through the eye, the organ, and sees the visual object. There's the hearing mind that looks through the ear, or hears through the ear, and hears a sound, and so forth, through all the 5 senses. And then there's the 6th one, which is mind itself. And mind looks through mind and sees mental objects. And mind, though, that mind, which is called manas, has another function as well, which is that it sees all the other 5 minds and it coordinates them so that when you look at your screen and hear these noises that are coming out of my mouth, it's all coordinated together. along with the feeling of your bottom in the chair and the smell of dinner cooking in the kitchen, if it is, and so forth. So that's the sixth consciousness. The seventh consciousness, let's come back to that. The eighth consciousness is the storehouse, vijnana. And that is where all memories are stored. It's very similar to Freud's idea of the unconscious, where your memories lie. So none of you are thinking about your mother until I say the word mother, and then mom pops to mind. She comes out of the storehouse. She lies in the storehouse, that memory of your mother, as a seed. They're called bijas. And those seeds come to life when they're stimulated by something in your conscious experience. So now you're thinking of your mom. Not only that, but those seeds perfume the aliyah. That perfuming is called vasana. And what it means is that you've got all of these seeds back there, your mother, your father, your aunt, your uncle, what happened to you when you were 6, what happened to you when you were 2, what happened to you when you were 22. All those things are back there, and they have a particular qualities, and they sort of determine who you are, your style, your smell, if you want, your odor, your perfume. Even though they're not conscious, they're back there in embryo, or in potential, rather, until they're triggered, until they trigger and they come to life. But they nonetheless perfume that. And that is sort of that vague sense that we all have of me, of who I am, and how I'm different, and me and my problems, me and my potentialities, me and my past, me and my future. And that all lies in the eighth consciousness, the aliyah. The seventh consciousness, which is called the defiled consciousness, looks back at the aliyah and says, that's me. That's where ego happens, in the seventh consciousness. It looks back at that vague sense of I and all those memories and tendencies that we've stored there, and says, that's me. This is the confused aliyah. There's another meaning for aliyah, though. You see, aliyah just means, it refers to this consciousness that sees all of this, that contains it, that contains all these memories and dreams. So there's an enlightened aliyah. And that enlightened aliyah is something that we practice when we meditate. It's clear, simple awareness. It's the awareness that allows you to be seeing your computer screen, hearing these words with just pure clarity, no reactiveness. When you rest in that aliyah, and that's the slogan, rest in the aliyah, you're resting in pure awareness, and it is extremely restful because there's nothing happening. You're not attached to any particular thought or event. It's this clarity, this lucid clarity that never leaves us. Only what changes is what's in that clarity. That is the ultimate aliyah, sometimes called Tathagatagarbha, meaning the Buddha nature, or Sugatagarbha, which means the essence of the one who has gone to bliss, meaning enlightened. He talks about that as being Sugatagarbha. And that aliyah is utterly lucid, clear awareness. We have it all the time, and we're enjoined when we meditate on the cushion to rest in that. And the way in which we rest in that is by seeing all the thoughts that arise in our mind and realizing they don't matter. They just come and they go. And when they go, sometimes there's a moment of just sheer clarity with no particular axe to grind, no particular direction. And then you start thinking, oh yeah, maybe I'm experiencing, aliyah. That's just another thought within the aliyah, because the aliyah is always there. This clear, lucid, it's like air. It's like the air that we live in. It's the atmosphere of pure knowingness. And then this new one that came out of that article that Philip showed us, that was a discussion that happened between Trungpa Rinpoche and the Translation Committee. which is a third version of aliyah. And it has to do with the fact that in the aliyah, in this clear awareness, everything that arises, sights, sounds, smells, tastes, bodily sensations, and thoughts, does so with extraordinary vividness. They call it in the language luminosity. It's luminous. Everything is luminous as it arises. This hand gesture, these words coming out of the mouth, they're luminous as they appear and disappear in this clarity. And that's the third version of aliyah. It's the aliyah that contains this extraordinary luminosity. And this is very tantric. Now we're moving into the Vajrayana, for sure, which of course is where Trungpa Rinpoche lived. The idea is that once you get rid of these mistakes of I and other and believing and all these thoughts that torture us, then the world, you see, they call it emptiness, right? Shunyata means emptiness. But what it does is it reveals an extraordinary fullness, the fullness of the beauty of this world. When you go out and you walk in nature and you see, there are moments, things that hit you, that stun you, that suddenly the light changes and you come alive and you just open your eyes and there's this stunning, vivid artists, Kurt and Meg, when the beauty of something just hits you, that is the luminosity coming to life. They are coming, it's like we're opening to it. And that's the third version of the aliyah, this clarity revealing extraordinary vividness and luminosity in the world and of all phenomena, sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and mental. So I'm thinking that what I'd like to do is send you out Charlie Rinpoche's treatment of this in PDF, and we do it again. Philip, would you be willing?
Sure.
Okay. We do it together. Because this is so
Eligible
core. We start with Trungpa Rinpoche says that we start with the absolute bodhicitta, which is what we're talking about tonight, because it is the foundation for then relative bodhicitta. It's also the foundation for us learning how to be, which is so effortless and relaxed. And we can all do it. And what it takes is to stop caring about all these things that we think are imperfections in us. They're just bullshit. They're just momentary passings. Meanwhile, we're right here in the middle of all this glory. And that's what we come back to. We just let it pass and begin to appreciate this extraordinary clarity, which reveals this extraordinary beauty, luminosity. Ursel in Tibetan. Great word, Ursel. I'm sorry, I got carried away there at 6:50. But this is such gorgeous stuff. And who was it who was saying all these different words for snow? Yeah, and all these different words for mind. It's really true. And all these different words for reality. Yeah. Dharmadhatu and bodhicitta and Tathagata-garbha, Sugata-garbha, they're all different in shunyata and all the rest. Goes on and on. Different, coming at it from slightly different angles. If we get through these 5 chapters, the rest is a piece of cake.
Yeah. Holy moly.
Any more comments or questions? If not, we'll close with a dedication of merit.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just read your chat, Dan. You're absolutely right. It was not the subconscious, it's the unconscious. That corresponds to the aliyah.
The other way, the subconscious corresponds.
Subconscious. I got it wrong. And he and his daughter Anna came up with the idea of basically this idea of that the Buddhists call seeds that lie there in potential and come to spring to life and influence the way we behave and perceive.
Yeah, and John Piaget too. He was the main explicator of the subconscious as opposed to the unconscious. Yeah.
All right, everybody.
Lodro had his hand
Lodro.
up.
Okay. Lodro.
Thank you so much, John. I'm so glad that you got carried away because that explanation of the aliyah, I think, cleared up so many things coming actually backwards onto the seventh consciousness identified as ego. I thought that was really beautiful. And I just really quickly wanted to comment how grateful I am to Philip, not just for the presentation, but also when Robert asked the question regarding the present in the middle. For some reason, it just made me think of the past as this very hard texture, crunchy and very kind of impenetrable, and the future being this very kind of like a moist cake, kind of soft and squishy, and the present being like the blade that just cuts right through every texture. And it's just so sharp and so precise and so thin. And the way that Philip described it, as in shedding or cutting, just made me think about how coming back to the present moment, there's a sharpness to it that can just cut through the hard texture of the past or the very cloudy nature of the future. And I'm very, very grateful for all the analogies. It was very beautiful and very poetic. Thank you, everyone.
Robert. Yes.
So could someone elaborate on I think a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the double-edged blade of Manjushri's sword in relation to this, what Lodro just brought up, cutting through the illusions.
Let's do it next week. It's a big subject. It has more to do with shunyata than with bodhicitta.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It has to do with cutting through, the two veils of primitive beliefs about reality and conflicting emotions. And it has to do with cutting through belief in I and other, which is saying almost the same thing. That's why it's two-edged. So it really has to do with emptiness, shunyata. All right. Who's leading the chants tonight? Was it Meg, right?
Right.
I'll put it up.
We'll close by dedicating the merit earned by our practice for the benefit of all sentient beings. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigdon's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Philip. Wonderful, amazing evening.
Thanks, Philip. Thanks, John. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, John.
Thank you,
Thank
Philip.
much.
Thank you, Philip.
Great,
Thanks,
great.
John.
Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Terrific.
Thank you.
Beautiful teachings.
Great. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night. lot to think about. Go to sleep.
A lot to not think about.
I not think about it.
Sure. That's
Oh, true. Yes. Thank you for that. I just understood.
Okay, I'm going to shut off the recording. Oh, is this recording happening?
Yes.
Oh,
it's
yes, it
still
is.
recording.